In this episode on the growth concept, we are joined by finance expert Renee, who's here to break down practical tips for budgeting, building a healthy bank account, and setting up the right financial foundation before you jump into the investing market. Tune in, you do not want to miss out on this episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode on the growth concept. I'm your host, Rennee Upton, where we dive into actionable insights and inspiring stories to help you reach your full potential. Whether you're navigating personal growth, mastering communication, or pursuing your financial freedom, we bring real-world strategies to you to accelerate your progress. That's enough from me. Let's get into it. Enjoy this episode. Welcome, Renee, to the Growth Concept podcast. Thank you so much for coming on this episode to share your wisdom and expertise in finance. This is a two-part series. This first part will be going into sorting your money out and getting your finances in order. And then we'll go more into the detail with investing side of things in part two. Welcome, Renee.
Thanks for having me, Rennee.
To kickstart this interview off, Renee, how long have you been in finance?
Been in financial planning for 20 years this year.
20 years, wow. Taking this path of finance, what has inspired you to take the path of finance, and why is it important to you that you do what you do?
I fell into financial planning in between study. I fell into the banking sector with just a full-time job. Really enjoyed it. I realised that I was able to help different clients with different issues on different days. So really enjoyed actually going to work, which led into then study and progressing my career. Why is it important? I think knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
And I just find being able to give people the tools to create their financial path so powerful. So still enjoy it the same as I did 20 years ago every day.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you said you help people with their issues, is this with budgeting issues, investing issues? Do you mind give us a pinpoint on what these actually are?
They can be from really small general advice points. They can be from complex strategic plans around investing, superannuation, wealth creation, protection, estate planning, aged care, anything. It really does involve a lot of different areas and life stages.
Yeah, some very important points there. What's your number one money tip for listeners? This is a very broad question, but I want you to pinpoint your number one money tip.
The golden question, Rennee. Number one money tip has to be budgeting and cash flow planning. The reason being is it really the cornerstone of a good financial plan is truly understanding how much it costs to be you and how much it costs for to reach your goals, potential, and what you want to achieve. That budgeting and cash flow planning really is just the understanding of your income and your expenses, and the difference in that can see you achieve what you want.
So with budgeting, how do you get budgeting right? Is there a starting point for beginners that have never done budgeting before?
You can use anything from there's tools out there, there's online Excel spreadsheets, there's apps, or you can simply pick up pad and pen. First step, when starting out, write it down. Actually getting it on paper or on your spreadsheet, record all your income coming in, and more importantly, all the stuff going out. So our expenses, bills, and so on. If you have a partner, I would always recommend including them, making sure everyone knows what's going on. The next part is review your expenses. So once you've got them written all down or recorded, actually looking at them and review it, see if you can get a better deal. So for example, car insurance. When the renewal comes up, can you get a better deal for your model of car or the sum insured? Go shop around. Don't have to do it every month, but maybe on the renewal. Make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck.
Yeah.
The next step, once you've got your expenses written and you've reviewed it, allocate it possibly for different bank accounts. So to help you budget in your day-to-day life, why don't you try and use different bank accounts to help you? So for example, why don't you have a spending account? Why don't you have a bills account? Why don't you have a savings? So it's just getting that expense list, getting out the coloured highlighters and maybe allocating it to different bank accounts to help you understand what your limits are, or you could set yourself some guidelines for each account.
Especially with like goal savers as well on different banks.
Definitely. The next thing is once you have done your expenses, income and expenses, you should know whether you have a surplus. If you don't, review those expenses, try and get a better deal. But really, then you should have a surplus.
What's a surplus?
Surplus is once you've done your income and expenses, what's left?
Yeah.
So what balance, so out of your pay each cycle, what is left after you pay all your expenses? So if you've covered all your bills, now that you've got a surplus or you've got your balance left, what are you going to do with it? This is the cool part. Budgeting doesn't have to be negative. You then get to pick what is your goal list and how are you going to achieve it. That's where the fun comes in.
Yeah.
So the last thing I think on how to nail a budget is making sure you don't set and forget, review it and adjust it. So I usually start out with reviewing pay cycles. So if you get paid fortnightly or if you get paid monthly, it takes 5 minutes. Review your budget. So go back to that spreadsheet, see if you've missed any expenses that may have popped up, new subscription, or if you forgot something originally, or see if your pay fluctuates, just adjust it. It should be a moving beast. It should work with you.
Yeah.
Over time, it'll honestly take you a few minutes each pay cycle to just review it, make sure it's all good, and away you go.
Yeah, awesome. Because I do my budgeting monthly.
Yeah.
But I've noticed a couple of patterns with, for example, like going to restaurants. 1 month would be a lot higher, and then I'll do an end of month report. Do you find that with your experience taking a few notes on what you've spent and what's
definitely
increased?
how it varies?
Yeah, definitely. Is that
Definitely.
worth noting that for the next month?
Yeah, and also to find trends. So, look, middle of the year, our rates come in.
Yeah.
If you own a home. December or leading into December is Christmas time. You know, you might be lashing out on presents, or you might be taking that holiday because you finally got some time off work. But you're right, there are trends through the year. If you can just make some little tiny notes, that's excellent. One thing I will mention as well is if you do take those notes, maybe consider bill smoothing. So
Bill smoothing.
I will touch on that.
Yeah.
It's a great budgeting tool. What it will do is once you have your expenses and your budget, you can see the trend. So for example, your utilities aren't paid every month. They might be every 2 months or every quarter, so every 3. You can spread that out. So instead of just paying a big $500 bill in a few months' time, you can pay a little bit from each pay and pay forward. So you can go online and you can usually go to these utility websites. So, you know, Clean Heat, and chuck in your direct debit.
Yeah, right.
And you can pay a smaller amount, like in little bite sizes, and bill smooth. So you might get at the end of that bill period a little bill, and you can adjust your direct debit up and down. But I find that really helps a lot of people. And a lot of the time you can bill smooth about any
Is
bill
that the same
comes
like
in.
car insurance and rego?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so you can.
What website do I go to find?
Usually the provider. So
The provider, yeah.
like I said, for utilities, you'd go directly to them. Rates, I get a lot of people and clients that bill smooth their rates and go to their council and they'd just get the BPay details and so on, and they can pay towards their own future bill.
That's an awesome point. Besides budgeting, what other areas should we focus on to ensure that healthy bank account?
The other areas that you can do is look at, number one, your cash flow plan,
Yep.
but then look at if you have any debt or lending and having a repayment plan in place. So whether you're paying the minimum or whether you're paying some extra repayments. Do you have a personal savings or emergency fund? So if something happens to you, do you have a plan B? Making sure you review your superannuation inside there, we have different investments, we have beneficiary options, and more importantly, are your contributions even going into that super fund? Or do you have multiple super funds?
How do we know if we have multiple super funds?
You can go onto the MyGov government website, and under that, some people might know that from doing their tax return.
Yep.
There is actually a superannuation tab on there, and it will actually show you any fund or balance that's listed under your name and tax file number.
Yeah, okay.
So you can have a look on there to see if you have multiple accounts. Last but never the least, to make sure you've got a good, healthy financial book is protection. Do you need insurance? And do you need a will?
That's some awesome points, Renee. Thank you. You touched on that emergency fund. Why is having an emergency fund even important, and why should I consider an emergency fund?
An emergency fund is another name of savings.
Savings, okay.
I think it's absolutely crucial. No matter where you are in life, things happen. Things break. Accidents occur.
Yeah.
So whatever happens, whether you need to run out and buy a hot water system for your house, or your car's broken down on the side of the road and you desperately need RAC to come and save you, the thing is, we can't control everything in our life. And the thing is, you could, if you don't have an emergency fund with a little bit of a buffer, savings-wise...
Buffer as in...
I mean like a savings balance, like an emergency fund, just another word for it. If we don't have that emergency fund there, like a stash of money to help us where we're in a time of need, we could be left stranded, or we could actually have to revert to debt to get us out of a hole. Again, the best financial plan is to make sure we have a plan B. So if accidents do happen along the journey, and we kind of need to be able to use our own savings or our own funds to help us over that hump, and then we can replace that. So if we use our emergency fund, let's say you need to replace your car battery, you can take yourself off, go buy one, and maybe over the next few months, you can replenish your emergency fund. So it's the Bank of Keone instead of the actual bank that you're lending from, and you're not needing to pay interest.
That makes sense. So how much money should I have in this emergency fund? And should I consider, for example, rego or insurance in this budgeting for this emergency fund?
Good questions. The bills should be looked at as in your budget through the expense. That's not an emergency fund.
Okay, yeah.
With an emergency fund, how much should we have in there? That's knowing your budget. So we suggest starting at a goal of your emergency fund savings, 3 to 6 months of your living costs, so your bills. Why? What happens if something happens to you this month and you can't go to work next month? You might be off for quite a few weeks. You might have broken your leg in a weekend sport match, or something may have happened to you that you don't have enough sick leave possibly to cover that. By starting with at least a couple of months of your living costs and bills, you know in the bottom of your heart that, hey, if something happens to me, I can cover myself for a few months.
Covered, so it saves that last minute stress and panic on top of what's already happening.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we always want to see people have an emergency savings fund before you consider looking at moving to the next step on wealth accumulation, like investing or anything like that. That is the starting point.
Gotcha. Let's just say hypothetically we got a debt, and if I hurt myself at work or something, or a sport on the weekend like you were saying, and I can't go to work and earn money, should I consider my debt in the emergency fund? For example, if I have a car loan, I account for those repayments, or is that something?
Yeah, because that's in your bills. So again, your emergency fund, if it's this, hypothetically, say it's 3 months, it'll be 3 months of your living costs. And at that time, if you've got a car loan, that car loan will be in your living costs, won't it?
That all.
That's right. Gotcha. So that will cover you, and that will give you peace of mind for that amount of time. That's the whole point of an emergency fund, is giving you the control and you peace of mind if something happens to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So with this being a 2-part series of getting my money in line and talking about getting started through investing, should I prioritize paying off any debts before I start investing, or can I jump in with a little bit and just worry about my debt later, if that makes sense?
The answer depends on the type of debt that you're referring to.
Yep.
So, for example, if you have credit card debt or a personal loan, that's bad debt. Let's work on getting rid of that. Number one, that's the one thing we want to tackle. Why reduce your hard-earned income with repayments with lifestyle items that depreciate? Trying to tackle the repayments and investing becomes difficult. We always want to see that you have that type of debt repaid before looking at wealth accumulation, which is investing. If you were to say have good debt, what we would do is work together at that's okay, because that's usually like a longer term plan, and we would then look at being able to start an investing plan.
So with bringing up debt, what are the different types of debt someone can be aware of? Because you brought up, yes, the personal loan and the credit card. Are they the only two debts and they're the bad ones, or is there other debts I should be aware of?
There's other types of debt. So you can have a secure or an unsecure loan. So that means secure is secure against an item. You mentioned a car loan.
Yep.
So you can have a secure car loan. So you use your car as collateral. That means if you can't make a repayment, they will take your car, essentially. Unsecured means they are lending you that money and you're not putting your car as guarantee.
Okay,
so guarantee could be another word for it.
Lending me this money, but they're lending me the money I owe them. So that just makes it bigger.
So secure loan will always have a slightly lower interest rate.
Yep.
An unsecure loan, because they don't have an asset to guarantee against it, they'll most likely, depending on those lending criteria, but if they give you the loan, it'll have a higher interest rate because it comes with a higher risk. It doesn't have something attached. Other types of loans is student loans for education purposes, personal loans, and that can range from loads of different items or reasons. Interest-free credit cards and interest-free terms through, as we know, the shopping centres, they offer those, and a range of goods. And then you've got your longer-term mortgages and stuff like that. So there are loads of different types of lending that you can get.
Seems like a massive list.
Yes.
So with breaking down that list, how do I classify good debt versus bad debt? Because I hear that saying thrown around a fair bit in those money books. What would be the difference?
Good debt, that is items like mortgages, business loans, or student loans. They steer towards achieving your goals. So these are items that you're lending for that are looking at increasing your wealth. So like I mentioned, mortgage is purchasing a house. Business loan or student loan is really focused on furthering your career and boosting your income in the future.
Yep.
Some of these can be tax deductible as well. Looking at bad debt refers to, as I mentioned, credit cards, personal loans, and those types of loans or interest-free lending products that are really associated with depreciated assets. And they usually come attached with higher interest rates. These are things like I mentioned, car loans, furniture goods, and things like that. We would usually look towards recommending people try and save for those items because they're usually a smaller dollar figure loan that people are trying to obtain.
Because I always see the buy now, pay later thing. For example, if I'm checking out an Amazon cart and it's only like $10, it still comes up with buy now, pay later. Is that good debt or bad debt? Because I have the money to buy it. No, would that be good or bad in that situation?
Like you said, with Amazon, it's usually a depreciating asset, so that would fall into the category of bad debt.
So the bad debt is essentially something that depreciates in value, and good debt is that potential to increase in value, whether it's a knowledge value, could be anything in this case.
Or get you in front. Like I said, those student loans will increase, your career and your income potential. So that's what it focuses on, steering you into the positive goal position.
How do I manage each of these debts? Because hypothetically, let's just say I have a credit card, I've just bought a bunch of stuff on, a car loan, a mortgage, and I bought a couch from buy now, pay later. All these debts are coming in, all this interest I have to repay, but I only have one income stream meant to be paying off all these debts. How do I go about this mountain of debts? What would be the most ideal way to go about this, in your opinion?
Reviewing a debt like that can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it can be stressful. The best thing is look at it with an open, neutral mind. So sit down and note them all down. Try not to become overwhelmed with it. Note them all down. The value, the interest, the repayments, so you can see it all on the paper there. Then what you want to do is look at them, which one has the highest interest, because you're paying for the luxury of having that liability. We want to use the domino effect. Probably have heard that. And what that means is once you have them listed out, you want to start trying to repay the one with the highest interest, because that will save you the most over the long term, right? And then you also sometimes, depending on how many of these little debts we have, even sometimes picking, if you've got one or two, these buy now, pay later schemes, sometimes paying the few little ones off will make you feel a bit lighter, a bit more at ease. You can channel those repayments to something bigger. It is different for everyone, but the thing is starting somewhere. So actually listing them out and trying to tackle them, and like I said, domino them down. Get rid of them slowly.
And also seek that professional help if needed.
Absolutely.
Well. Yeah. So let's do another hypothetical scenario. I have no debts and I have an income and I've just finished school. How do I stay clear of debt? Because we spoke about, the surplus income budgeting, but it'll get to a point where it's like, okay, I have to buy a house.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. How do I stay clear of debt? Or is it just strictly keeping an eye on those numbers?
Going back to those few points about getting budgeting right. If you write it down and you know what your surplus, so that's the balance left, you need to know what your goal is. So if your goal is hypothetically buying that house because you don't have any other debt, you can start understanding what your budget for the new house is.
Yep.
And then actually start saying, well, what type of deposit do I need? What savings capacity do I have? And how am I going to achieve it? Making a plan to achieve that goal.
Gotcha.
If it is something that's smaller, like you said, we don't need to avoid debt at all costs. But if it is that smaller, like I said, bad debt, what we can do is put a savings plan in place to buy it forward instead of paying back interest. So again, if it's a car loan, you might find that you'll be able to save within 6 to 12 months to get your goal car or your dream vehicle. So instead of just racing out, the fear of missing out is real. And I do truly understand people wanting the item now and paying for it later. You have to think whether it's worth it. Is it a good debt or is it a bad debt?
Just really restrict yourself.
It's finding that happy life and financial balance. Yeah.
So for the young listeners and also myself, why should I even consider insurance? Because I know I've heard Super has life insurance or something.
You are right. Insurance is protection and it does come with a premium costing.
Yep.
Insurance, same as your car insurance, provides you that stability and security, but this is for you and your family. If you ever become injured, you can't work, or you unfortunately pass away. So that's what personal insurance is. And you're right, some superannuation have insurance as a default option, or you can actually buy personal insurance directly through insurance companies as well.
Yep.
Like I mentioned, it provides a peace of mind to ensure you can keep a roof over your head for you and your family, and also pay for those bills that you have coming in if something happens to you and you can't work. Usually, again, these are for larger events. This is not for just the common cold. These are for longer term items there.
What age should I start considering insurance in your opinion?
I believe it's not age-based, it's more wrapped around what's happening in your life. So for example, if you're purchasing a new house, if you have partner, long-term partner, or starting a family. So it might be linked up with getting that larger mortgage. So talking about debt, it might be you've taken on your first house purchase. That's a really large purchase you've made. And if you have a partner you're going in with, what happens if you can't work or something suddenly happens to you? How are we going to afford that mortgage going forward? Or if you have a few kids, what happens if you can't work because of a serious illness or injury?
Yeah, that makes sense. Should I consider insurance if I'm working full-time and I do not have a family or partner yet, just to somewhat cover myself, or is that something you look at a bit further down the line?
Again, there's different types of insurance. Inside super and personal insurance. Some of the areas are life insurance, total and permanent disability,
Yep.
we have trauma, and we have income protection. Even looking at income protection might protect your salary, and it might help cover those bills if you don't have a plan B.
That emergency fund.
That's right, that emergency fund. But remember, that emergency fund might only cover you for 3 months, depending on what your asset position is. Like you said before, you should always seek of us to speak to someone and actually run through your personal situation, because it is different for everyone.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Renee. We've gone into detail about sorting your money out, about different types of budgeting, as well as going into good debt, bad debt, and insurance. I got one last question for you. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self, what is one piece of advice you'd give yourself with the knowledge you have now?
Hard question, but I think it would definitely be around compounding interest. I was in finance, like I mentioned, 20 years ago, and something, if I was to be able to go back and give myself the advice that I know now, is truly understand how compounding interest works with investing.
Yep.
And it is a real thing. What is compounding interest? That is when you make a small investment and over time it generates interest. So that could even be your bank interest or a share or an investment of any nature. What it is it receives interest that first year and it compounds each year. So the following year you receive interest on the initial plus the interest from the first year. So it compounds up. What it means is returns can generate and snowball quite quickly, and over time your small investment that you are chipping away and working hard at can slowly over time become a much bigger asset. It's just something, until you look at it and understand it, compounding interest is such a big tool in an overall financial plan. So I think it's something you should maybe touch on in your next session wrapped around investing.
Wow, that's an amazing point, and I'll make sure I add that to the list. Thank you, Renee. So we're talking about budgeting and stuff. Do you have any resources a person can go to, like, discover what budget they need or what different types of insurance there is out there? Do you have any websites or anything that we could go to?
Sure. Like I said, budgeting is very personal, and I suggest using a tool that you just find simple and easy. I personally love the government provided website moneysmart.com.au. It has a very basic and easy to use budget on there, so check that out. Like I said, go to also your MyGov. That will help you find any multiple superannuation funds that you may have around there, and you can then investigate whether there is any type of insurance. I believe on the MyGov it actually lists under the super balance if there's insurance included in there, and you can start just taking the time and looking at what you have, making sure everything that you have has a purpose.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, thank you so much, Renee, for coming on this episode and talking about sorting your money out. Thank you so much, Renee, and I look forward to our next part 2 episode about talking about investing.
Thanks for having me, Kearney.
That brings us to the end to another episode on the Growth Concept podcast. I want to give a massive thank you to Renee for sharing her guidance on how to sort finances out before diving into investing. Remember, financial freedom starts with having that solid foundation, having a budget, the emergency funds and debt management, and understanding the importance of insurance. If you've gained one thing out of this episode, make sure you subscribe to the Growth Concept podcast to stay updated. And the bigger the channel gets, the more guests I can bring on to help you become the best version of yourself. I also challenge you to leave a review on how you thought this episode went and how we can improve for next time. Also, share this episode with family or friends who are looking to improve their financial habits. You can also connect with me on social media under the Growth Concept so you can be updated with content to help you grow. Don't miss out on part 2 where we talk about investing. Until then, keep growing. Disclosure: we do not know your financial situation. Everything said in this episode is only for general advice and entertainment purposes only. If you are in need of assistance, please seek a licensed financial advisor's help around your needs.